All right, let's get cooking. Welcome to the latest edition of Chin Check Sports Radio. I'm your host, JB. I want to thank you all for taking the time out to join us. And as always, we welcome any suggestions, feedback, comments, and criticisms, which improves the quality of our program, which ultimately improves your listening experience. Before we get started, I want to tell all of you thank you for your tremendous support. People are slowly but surely finding out about who we are and what we do. They enjoy and respect the passion with which we speak. But as I always say here at Chin Check Sports Radio, we do this because we love it, as we're simply sharing our passions with you all as we continue to build our listening army to take over the world. You know how we feel at Chin Check Sports Radio. If you go back and listen to our first broadcast, how we are real, true boxing fans. We respect the skills of the sport, the fighters, where they put their bodies through to entertain us, to chase glory and legacy, and of course money, because they are professional prize fighters, knowing how they literally place themselves in harm's way every time you step in between those ropes. We love the sport. You see some of our countdown broadcasts that we've done have usually centered around boxing. So you know we have all the respect in the world for boxers, and definitely want to extend our congratulations to Terence Crawford and on an amazing career. Definitely, he announced retirement on December 16th, so we know that we're a little bit behind the eight ball and doing a broadcast about his career, but that's not something that we wanted to rush. We definitely wanted to take our time and really recognize his greatness. However, we feel a little bit differently than others about his place in historical settings in terms of Mount Rushmore and all-time rank list, but this is the thing that we're going to delve into. So Terence Crawford, at the age of 38 years old, decided to retire from boxing. Now, I know people have heard this before, especially in boxing. Guys retire, then for some reason or another, whether it's money, whether they know nothing else to do, they end up coming back. So we can only hope that Bud will stay retired. But of course, history tells us probably not, especially boxing guys do come back for whatever reason. So Bud Crawford won world titles from lightweights at 135 pounds all the way up to super middleweight 168 pounds. So this guy is only the second male boxer to become a three-weight undisputed world champion. So this guy definitely was collecting hardware, definitely has an amazing resume. And Bud Crawford finished his professional career 42 wins, no losses, no draws, 31 knockouts. So definitely, one of the handful of guys to retire undefeated. We've done a previous broadcast where guys like Joe Calzaghe, Andre Ward, Floyd Mayweather, Rocky Marciano, Ricardo Lopez. You only have a handful of guys. And now think of the great boxers: Sugar Ray Robinson, Muhammad Ali, Henry Armstrong, Harry Greb, Jack Dempsey, Bernard Hopkins, Marvin Hagler, Ray Leonard, Thomas Hearns, Roberto Duran, Kid Gavilan, Archie Moore, Ezra Charles, Jersey Joe Walcott. These are people who are considered some of the greatest fighters of all time, and they all have losses. So it's a very rare thing that guys retire from boxing undefeated, and he's one of a handful of guys to retire undefeated. Again, Floyd Mayweather, Joe Calzaghe, Bud Crawford, Andre Ward, Rocky Marciano. We have to look at that. I think there's another guy named Sven Otke, but definitely not too sure of that. Another 168-pounder of the early 2000s, whether he retired undefeated. Ricardo Lopez, he retired undefeated. So it's very rarefied air to retire undefeated. And yes, Van Opke did retire undefeated. So we definitely were correct on that. So it's a very rare occurrence that guys actually, they have no losses in their professional career. So definitely much credit to that. Now, some notable fights in the career of one Bud Crawford. The first fight that comes up is June of 2018, a KO in the 9th round versus Cuban star Yuriorkis Gamboa. And if you go back and watch this fight, it was a very exciting fight. It was a fight in Bud's hometown of Omaha, Nebraska. And We thought Gamboa had the early advantages, but once Bud made those adjustments that he was known to make, definitely took the fight to him, switching stances, and definitely beat up Gamboa, in the 9th round to eventually score the knockout. And that was the first fight that really kind of put Bud on the map in terms of boxing fans. I know very popular inside of Omaha, Nebraska, his home city and home state. But in terms of boxing fans, it kind of got people's attention to say, and that fight was on HBO. And it got fight fans saying, hey, who's this guy, Bud Crawford? He's a very exciting fighter. He was a lightweight at the time. So, hey, it definitely kind of got people's attention. Next fight, November 2014, a unanimous decision victory over one Ray Beltran. In April of 2015, a TKO in the 6th round versus Thomas Dunorme. October of 2015, a TKO in the 10th round against Thierry Jean. February of 2016, a TKO in the 5th round against one Hank Lundy. In that fight, when Bud beat him up, you saw Bud kind of get in the guy's face, so clearly there was something personal there. July of 2016, a unanimous decision victory against one Victor Postal. In December of 2016, a TKO in the 8th round against John Molina. In August of 2017, a KO in the 3rd round against Julius Indongo. June of 2018, a TKO in the 9th round against one Jeff Horn. October of 2018, a TKO in the 12th round against Jose Benavidez Jr. If that name sounds familiar, he's the younger brother of the Mexican monster, David Benavidez. And if you watch Creed 3 with Jonathan Majors and obviously Michael B. Jordan, he played the champion Felix Chavez, who Jonathan Majors' character, Dame Anderson, beat to become the heavyweight champion of the world in that particular movie. In April of 2019, a TKO in the 6th round against one Amir Khan. November of 2020, a TKO in the 4th round against Kell Brook. In November of 2021, a TKO in the 10th round against the ever constant presser Sean Porter. July of 2023, in a very anticipated fight. And this was probably the biggest welterweight fight, we would say, since Mayweather-Pacquiao. And again, wasn't on the level of Mayweather-Pacquiao, but these two guys were, because now these guys, they didn't have the star power of a Mayweather and Pacquiao. What made this fight so intriguing was both guys were undefeated, welterweights, and it's a thing that happens. I mean, if you want to go back to Oscar De La Hoya and Ike Quartey, they both were undefeated. So when you have welterweights, maybe one guy with one loss and like a person undefeated, this goes back to Oscar De La Hoya and Shane Mosley. De La Hoya had one loss, while Shane Mosley was undefeated. You had Thomas Hearns, who was undefeated, while Ray Leonard had the one loss against Roberto Duran. So the welterweights have always been one of the glamour divisions, whether it's heavyweight, middleweight, welterweight, some can say lightweight. So generally the 4 glamour divisions and the welterweight division, when there ever is a big fight, it definitely gets people talking. So this was a very much anticipated fight, a very delayed fight, posturing on both sides, where you had Spence believing that Bud was ducking him for taking whatever deal that it was. There was a fight that Bud had fought against David Advance. I can't even pronounce a guy named David A. In December of 2022, that was supposed to be Bud's fight. That's supposed to be the Spence fight. Bud ended up taking that fight. But folks, for a welterweight unification fight, that was a pick'em fight. We thought Spence was going to win the fight because he was a naturally bigger welterweight. You had people who picked Bud because of Bud's skill level. I don't think you ever seen a beatdown like this in a highly anticipated fight. It was a beatdown from the 2nd round, where Spence came out. We thought he won the 1st round by being the aggressor. We thought that Spence body attack would have beat up the smaller Bud Crawford. And from the 2nd round on, Bud just beat the hell out of Errol Spence Jr. I mean, you can go back and listen to the reviews of the fight. It was a thorough thrashing of a highly anticipated matchup between undefeated fighters, and Bud Never seen anybody dominate anybody that bad in such of a big fight. Again, we've seen fights where guys were just overmatched or guys might have been outboxed. It was a thorough demolition of another undefeated fighter, another world champion, and guys were both class acts afterwards, but Bud just beat the hell out of Errol Spence. And by the way, Errol Spence has not fought since. In August of 2024, a unanimous decision victory against Israel Madrimov. And in September of 2025, that would have been his final fight against Saul Canelo Alvarez in the biggest fight of 2025. A much anticipated fight, a fight that really started off in social media circles. I know Bud was kind of putting it out. Bud was putting it out there about jumping up 2 weight classes because in the Madrimov fight, he fought at junior middleweight, 154 pounds. He wanted to jump up 2 weight classes past the middleweight division to go up to 168 pounds to fight Canelo Alvarez. If you go back and listen to the preview that we did of the particular fight, we felt that history actually was on Bud's side and definitely trying to move up 2 weight classes. We gave it to fighters that actually did it. If it wasn't Roberto Duran, Bernard Hopkins, Evander Holyfield. So we gave you the fights in which guys have moved up, mostly have moved up 2 weight classes and beat the reigning champion. So we felt that history was on Bud's side, but he definitely won the fight. Now, where we disagree with other people's assessments, they're making it seem like Bud is winning the ring and just walked over Canelo Alvarez. And we don't think that was the case. We thought that Canelo won some rounds. Bud won more rounds, more convincing, but it wasn't a thorough beatdown if you listen to people tell the story. So that would be the final fight of Bud Crawford's career. Now, the question that comes up, where does Bud rank all time? Where is Bud standing amongst the greats? Now, let's really take our time and let's really break this down. Just read to you the fighters that Bud Crawford beat, especially the notable fights. So the question is, where does Bud rank? In terms of skills, Bud is up there in terms of skills. I think for a guy to be a switch hitter, to fight equally both and fight great on one side, much like a Marvin Hagler, and very few guys are able to do that. So Bud definitely has that okay in the bag in terms of skills. All right, when you think of skills, you think of Mayweather, you think of Ali, you think of boxing skills, and Bud had it all. Bud can fight orthodox, he can fight southpaw, has a good right jab. He knows how to mix his punches up. He's actually an excellent counter puncher, excellent ring IQ, good chin. He moves his head, conditioning. He checks off everything that you want in a professional fighter. I know there was this push online to somehow start a debate that Bud Crawford would beat Floyd Mayweather. It would not happen. Floyd Mayweather would definitely beat Bud Crawford, and quite frankly, it's not even close. I can see that being a unanimous decision. 8 rounds to 4, 7 rounds to 5 at the most. I think Floyd Mayweather is head and shoulders above Bud Crawford. Bud would definitely win his rounds, but we definitely think that Floyd would eventually win the fight. So let's kind of put that out there and let's kind of put that to rest. But you can have your opinion and you're definitely free to it. Now, in terms of ranking, we just read to his opponents. Does that really scream like a murderer's row of fighters of his era? Maybe the Victor Postal fight. At first, Postal was undefeated when they fought, and he went on to have 5 losses in his career. The Errol Spence fight. That was his most dominating performance. The problem is, Bud Crawford himself said Errol Spence is not a Hall of Famer. It's coming out of his mouth. Now, we want to make it clear that we know fighters will big themselves up, have inflated egos, will talk themselves up, and we totally understand that. So we don't want the guys who talk themselves up say he's the greatest, but when he says out of his own mouth that Errol Spence Jr. was not a Hall of Famer, that kind of takes away from his own resume. This is something he said after beating Spence. He felt Spence was not a Hall of Famer. But then by that rationale, that means the only Hall of Famer who Bud Crawford ever beat was Canelo Alvarez, who already had 2 losses. You can't tell me you can be placed in the upper echelon of professional fighters and only have one quality win against a Hall of Famer. That's why I think Bud gets knocked down in terms of all-time lists. One Hall of Famer beat. Now, let's mention Floyd Mayweather's resume. Diego Corrales, Oscar De La Hoya, Arturo Gatti, Shane Mosley, Miguel Cotto, Manny Pacquiao, Ricky Hatton. Those are the Hall of Famers that Floyd Mayweather beat. Muhammad Ali, George Foreman, Joe Frazier, is Ken Norton in the Hall of Fame? But definitely Joe Frazier, George Foreman, Floyd Patterson, Hall of Famers. So you have guys who beat a bunch of Hall of Famers. That's just what it is. We don't think that Bud has that resume to be up there all the time, and that hurts Bud, and it should hurt Bud. It doesn't take away from his greatness in the ring. In terms of skills, you can make an argument that Bud will be ranked up there in terms of boxing skills, in terms of pure boxing skills. When you think of Bud Crawford, you think of boxing skills. When you think of Evander Holyfield, right, you think of heart, right, you think of determination. You really don't think necessarily Holyfield's boxing skills, even though we had it, but when the proverbial stuff hit the fan, Holyfield relied on slugging, relied on his chin, and he relied on his heart. So you don't think of Holyfield as necessarily a great boxer. You think of a guy who has some boxing skills, who showed some heart, who fought everybody and was not scared of anybody. So you definitely would think of that. Hell, speaking of Evander Holyfield, victories over Mike Tyson, victories over George Foreman. I mean, hey man, it is what it is. So that's just two Hall of Famers. I even going through all his resume right there. So he just doesn't, in terms of Bud Crawford, does not have the names on his resume to be considered up there. And I think I'm not going to say his ranking is going to improve as time goes on. I can make an argument his ranking will probably either stay the same or be diminished slightly. Now, with certain boxers, as time goes on, history does tend to reward them. And when I watch documentaries of Marvin Hagler, he's considered one of the greatest middleweights of all time. But at the time when he fought, he wasn't really seen like that for whatever reason. But as time went on, he was being rewarded, say he actually was one of the great fighters. Maybe that'll happen with Bud. Maybe as history can reassess his place in history. And sometimes it even happen with presidents. When presidents now, as time goes on, there's kind of break out a magnifying glass to look at the president and their accomplishments. Now their place in history improves. Maybe the same thing can happen with Bud, but as of right now, he's pretty low. And if you're asking us, will we include him in our best fighters of all time list that we did before, our top 10 fighters of all time fighters that we grew up watching, Bud Crawford does not crack the top 10. And he would maybe make our honorable mention. That's probably the best we can come up with. He's not cracking the top 10. He's not getting in over Mayweather, over Pacquiao, over Hopkins, over Lewis, over Pernell Whitaker, over Holyfield, over Roy Jones, over Tito, over Chavez Sr., over Barrera and Morales. Not happening. If you look at our honorable mentions, Tyson, De La Hoya, Canelo. So now if you say, well, he has a head-up victory over Canelo, that's when do you squeeze out Canelo and then put in Bud? That's a fair statement. Miguel Cotto, that's a fair statement in terms of our honorable mention. So he will maybe make our honorable mention, but he's not cracking our top 10 fighters of all time that we grew up watching. Again, based on his resume does not stack up with the rest of the guys on that particular list. So, but this no knock on Bud Crawford. Is he the best fighter of his era? Yeah, no questions asked. Maybe some people like Inoue, the Japanese fighter, like a little bit better. He doesn't have the exposure that Bud Crawford has, but Bud Crawford is the best fighter of this particular era. I think the fight against Canelo kind of sealed that, and he's kind of been consistent. We had the rise and fall of Deontay Wilder, rise and fall of Tyson Fury. So you had other guys who came and went, Errol Spence Jr., Sean Porter. So other guys came and went. Gervonta Tank Davis, he's kind of up in the air. Not very consistent. Ryan Garcia is a basket case. Shakur Stevenson is trying to make his way up, but his career is not done yet. So in terms of prime years, best years fighting, the post-Mayweather era, you can say, yeah, that Bud Crawford was that guy of the post-Mayweather era. So for that 10-year gap, 10, 11-year gap, that Bud Crawford kind of was that guy. I know people love Tank. Some people might say Tank Davis, and you're entitled to your opinion. But in terms of who he beat, how he beat, kind of cleaning out divisions, you would have to give it to Bud. But that's it. And if that's the case, and that shows his era wasn't really that good, because, again, only one Hall of Famer he beat on his resume is one Canelo Alvarez. So it's nothing to take away from the career of Bud Crawford. Again, best fighter of this particular era. However, his legacy takes a hit when you stack it up against other all-time great lists and other all-time great fighters on all-time great lists. The resume, it just doesn't stack up. But we definitely want to say congratulations, to Bud Crawford on an amazing career. You should enjoy the fruits of your labor. It's what you work hard for. Definitely been fighting ever since he was a kid. So Bud Crawford, he definitely is that guy. So Bud, definitely congratulations on your career. And till the next time, it's Chin Check Sports Radio. Signing out.